Glam Girls, welcome back to my channel. It's Chelsea, where we talk about all things glam and all things girly. I'm a beauty consultant, and today finally talking about all of the palettes that came out in 2022 that I think are worth talking about. So we will be talking about some of my favorites, but I'll also be sharing with you palettes that came out in 2022 that I really didn't care for and the reasons why. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. And if you are new, I would love for you to consider subscribing to my channel because we really make good content over here and we'd love to have you. So let's get right into this video. Now, let's just get this one right on out the way. I'm gonna start backwards, starting with my absolute most favorite palette of this entire year. Well, of 2022, because we're in 2023. Danessa Myricks Lightworks for Transcendence palette. Now, I'm not gonna spend too much time here because there's no need for us to do that. This palette is just splendid. When I saw this palette, what made me fall in love with this one was because it truly re-sparked creativity in me as an artist. And when I saw it, I was like, I really want to do this palette justice. Like, I want to step out of my comfort zone with it. I want to challenge myself. And every time I pick this palette up, whether I'm doing like a more complex eye look or a simple eye look, I just always feel like it inspires me, and I love that. And not all of my makeup does that. It really doesn't. So when I do find a piece of makeup that does do that, it is immediately a favorite just for that one reason. But on top of that, formulation is to die for. So these shades that we see right here, they are so silky. She calls them her velvet, her chrome, hold on, velvet chrome shades. And I mean, like smooth as butter. Like, let me just give you just some very quick swatches of them. I mean, barely touching the pigment, and look at that. Like, look at all of that intensity. And the intensity that you see in the pan is the intensity that you see on your eyes. These shades right here are her aqua chrome shades. You spray them a few times with water to activate them. So beautiful. And then she's got her pressed chrome flakes here. I mean, this is not necessarily your everyday palette, but it is for sure an amazing palette that I think if you're into color or you want to be challenged in your artistry, you need one. One that I didn't need, that was really nice, but I didn't need it. It was the Pat McGrath. This is the Celestial Nirvana Bronze Bliss eyeshadow palette. I actually have the other one. Or, you know what? I think I actually decluttered that one. I bought the, oh, I can't remember the name of the other one. It was the more like pinky based one. And this is the thing. This is a beautifully formulated eyeshadow palette. Nothing is wrong with the formula. I actually really enjoyed using it. And I think I did declutter the other one. And I kept this one because I enjoyed the color story, more neutral, a little cool. But it's not anything I don't have. So if I weren't a creator, I would not have bought this palette because it's not anything that's like groundbreaking, but it is nice to have. I do enjoy it, so I am glad to have it. It's just one I didn't need. Okay, another favorite from this year, Natasha Denona My Dream palette. Okay, so this palette, actually never did a dedicated review on this palette. I can't remember what happened, but like something happened and then like so much time had passed and I felt like, well, nobody really wants to see this. But I have talked about it on my channel multiple times. I don't know what it is about this palette that just makes me want to reach for it, but it, for me, is like the perfect travel palette because every tone that I would want in a palette when I'm traveling is here. I love that this palette gives me some diversity in the eye looks that I can create because I can go with more softer looks around this side of the palette. I can definitely go deep and smoky around this side of the palette. And I don't feel like when I use this one, I'm getting the exact same look over and over again. It's so beautiful, and the formula is splendid. Like, there's not one eyeshadow in this palette that's a dud or that I go like, oh, well, you know, that didn't have to be there. I think my only critique was that I wish that she would have taken out a couple of these shades here because on my complexion, you really can't see too much of a difference between those shades. So I would have liked if she would have added another shade or two to diversify that area of the palette. But outside of that critique, absolutely a splendid palette. So happy with it. Still reaching for it. Like, I'm going out of town this weekend, and that's probably going to be the palette of choice that I'm going to take with me. One that was so disappointing. Like, I looked forward to this, and when I put this on my eyes, I was like, are you kidding me? How could you do this? Artist Couture's Supreme Mauves palette. So this palette, if y'all know me, you know I love me a good pinky purpley-ish type of palette. I love this color story. And so when I saw it, I was like, man, the Supreme Nudes, like, I still reach for that palette. I know this one's gonna be fire, formula-wise. And the only good thing in this palette are the mattes. These shimmers and metallics are just like, they're not extra pigmented like I expect them to be. They're not even like mildly pigmented. I had to work to build up the pigmentation, and I can work with this palette and make it work. And honestly, around the summertime, I actually reached for this palette a good amount of times, and I traveled with it a couple times, but I just was frustrated with the amount of work that I had to put into it when the first palette was so beautifully formulated. Like, I don't know what they were doing with this one formula-wise. I don't know if they were trying to experiment with some new types of formulas, but I think if they would have came out with this same color story in the older formulation, like, this would have been easy top 3 favorite palettes for me, because the color story, stunning. That darn formula though, just like, what are we doing? Favorite. Now this one technically I think came out like December of 2021, but I abused this palette like the beginning of 2022, so that's why this is in here. Oh, that darn Bridgerton Collection 1. Oh, Pat McGrath. And this palette, I did not think I could love this color story like this. Like, I first thought, I was like, I'm a Bridgerton fan, like, definitely getting it because of, you know, the show. I love Pat McGrath. Like, you know, whether or not I use it, it is what it is. But I mean, I used the mess out of this palette, and I enjoyed all the looks that I created with it. And I felt like I was actually able to get different looks with this palette. And I mean, I used this palette for months. Like, I would say for about the first few months of 2022, I was reaching for this palette consistently, you know, if I didn't have to use another palette. It's just so pretty. And I mean, once again, it's got the tones in it that I love. Tons of pinky shades. And then I love that with these 2 shades, I could use them as blushes. I would reach for this one as a highlighter. I would even use this one as like a blush as well. I mean, just such a beautiful all around face palette. This palette hit for me. And I actually love the packaging. Like, it's a nice sturdy cardboard packaging that, you know, really represents Bridgerton. So this one was a sure hit for me. Now one that I was like, I honestly should have never bought this palette. Never. Just should have just left it right on at the store. But I was like, I haven't bought an Anastasia palette in a minute. So this is what? The Nouveau palette. I can't tell you anything that's wrong with it. I really can't. Formula is exactly how we know their formula to be. Very pigmented, got some fallout, but I don't ever like take anything off for fallout because, you know, it is what it is. It just doesn't really do much for me. And I remember reviewing this palette and being like, I like it. I enjoyed the look that I got with this palette, but I also was just like, I need this palette. It just was one of those, like, I just don't need it. Like, and I don't even think nobody really checking for it like that for me to buy it, because I know like a lot of people are asking about it. It just was like, you should have just left that right on at the store. I should have went with my intuition and been like, don't get it, Chelsea. Ain't nobody asking for it. You're not even really that interested in it. Like, it's a beautiful color story, beautiful formula, but like, you know, it's not one of those palettes that you're just gonna be reaching for all the time. I didn't listen, but here we are. Okay, now another one that I was like, ooh, okay. She's a heartbreaker. Now, I didn't use this one nearly as the first one, but I still really enjoyed it. And, oh, okay. And it's Pat McGrath's Bridgerton 2 collection. So this color story, I definitely used less than the first one. First one, couldn't get enough of it. This one, I didn't use as much, but I still use it, still really enjoyed it. And just like with the other one, I used these two shades as blush, this shade right here as a highlight. Oh, this shade, oh, this could not get enough of them when I would use this palette. So really enjoyed this one. Once again, enjoyed the packaging. Like, she killed the packaging on these eyeshadow palettes for me. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed them, and I wish all of the packaging for the collections would have been like this, like in this form and this like sturdy cardboard packaging. If you're gonna do cardboard, like, do it sturdy like that. Oh, okay, here's one. This one, I knew for the most part I really wasn't gonna care for it, but I did wanna try it to be a resource for representation. And there's nothing wrong with this palette, but it just isn't one that I'm, you know, that I would buy on my own because I truly like gravitate to it. Natasha Denona Retro Glam Palette. I think the brand sent this one to me. I think they did, or I bought it. I can't remember, y'all. I can't remember. But the color story is pretty. It's just too light. And for complexions that are around my complexion and deeper, the intensity that we need for tones like this, it's just not there, and it's totally fine. And I remember when I reviewed this palette, I was like, I'm not taking anything away from it because I think Natasha is one of the fewer brands that really does make products inclusive for everyone. So when she comes out with a product that is more geared toward lighter complexions, I don't take that anything. I don't blame her for that, or I don't go like, oh, where's this for us? Because she probably just released something not too long ago for complexions that are deeper, that maybe complexions that are fairer or lighter couldn't really use, or, you know, couldn't get as much as they wanted to from that palette or that product. So I don't take anything away from this. I think it's beautiful, but it's definitely not one that, even when the spring comes, it's not one that I'm gonna be reaching for a lot because the tones are just really light. And that's totally fine. I actually love the packaging. I love the color story. And a palette that I do love that is similar to this, color story wise, if you know, you already know. Sydney Grace and Mel Thompson. So Mel obviously is not here with us anymore, but when Natasha came out with her mini retro glam palette, or the mini retro palette, Mel was like, I need a larger version of this, and if I could create it, it would look like this. So we're only looking at this part of the palette. But this color story right here has the depth and the intensity that is going to benefit deeper complexions, or complexions that just have more richness to them. I love it. The formulation, spectacular. Like, there was no question that the formulation wasn't going to be what it needed to be. It's just beautiful. Like, I've used this bundle a few times, and every time I use it, I'm like, gosh, Mel, you knew exactly what you were doing when you put this together. This is going to be the palette I'm gonna be reaching for in the spring when I wanna use these types of colors. And, you know, to get use out of the Glam palette, I will probably, you know, mix and match, but in all honesty, I probably will just use this to get what I'm looking for. So thoroughly enjoyed this one. Still gonna be reaching for this one because, in my opinion, this palette can be used year round. And I keep calling it a palette, but it's really a bundle of singles. So if you do order this bundle, just make sure that you have a, what do you call this? A magnetized palette so that you can, you know, place them in. But surefire winner with that color story was Sydney Grace. The one that I also, like, when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be really nice. And then I used it and I was just kind of like, this wasn't as nice as I really thought. And I think I only used it once, maybe twice, and there it is. Huda Beauty Empowered Palette. Now here's the thing. The formulation, I have nothing bad to say about it. The formula is really, really pretty. And I remember using this palette and enjoying using the palette. Now, what I did not enjoy in this palette are these two, I guess they're like liner shades, or I think it's 3 of them. These are like 3 liner shades, but They don't work well as liners because if you try to put them on top of like powder eyeshadow, then they're gonna like pick up the product. And you really can't put like, you can't put this down and then put like a powder liner over top. It just doesn't really work well that way. Now I have used these as a base, so like put them all over the eye and maybe put this shade as a transition shade, let it dry for a bit, and then put like a powder shadow over top, and that worked. But I'm like, I'm not going through that with all of these. Like, it's not worth it. And then I didn't like that, excuse me, for the tones in this area of the palette, at least against my complexion, I really didn't see a lot of diversity. So it was like these, excuse me, sorry, I keep clearing my throat. These 5 shades right here just collectively didn't do much for a look because they look too similar against my complexion. And then we've got, you know, these shimmers that are really pretty, but it was just like, once I delved into the palette, I was like, this really isn't giving me what I thought it was gonna give me. And it's also not giving me as much diversity as I thought, because once I eliminate the shadows that aren't showing up either differently on my skin, or, you know, I take the liner shades away, like, it limits what I can use. So this is one that I probably should not have bought for those reasons, but didn't realize that until I actually used the palette. So that's that. Still a beautifully formulated palette, but those are my critiques as to why I don't really reach for it, and why if I would have never bought it, I wouldn't have missed it at all. Okay, one that I enjoy, oh, okay. At this point, I'm like a broken record for this palette. Makeup by Mario's Ethereal Eyes palette. Okay, if you don't have this palette yet, then, you know, you may not want it. But I'm just telling you, this one right here is so stinking good. If I were ranking the palettes that I actually love, this would come in at number 2. Hands down, no questions asked. Number 2 palette of the year, because number 1 we already talked about. This palette right here is such the perfect everyday, neutral, barely there but there, fairy dust, angelic eyes type of palette. I mean, who doesn't want their eyes to look like that on a daily basis? I know I want my eyes to look like this on a daily basis. So pretty. It's the shades right here that really do it for me. They just like fairy dust. Mattes blend really beautifully, and then I love these 2 more opaque shimmer shades. Like, this palette doesn't look like much, but putting it on the eyes and seeing how the shades and formulas all work so well together, oh my gosh. This is another one that I have traveled with so much. Like, for the latter part of this year, I think this palette came out around the Sephora Savings event in October, late October, early November. So when I did travel, I think I traveled maybe like 3 or 4 times between when it came out and the end of the year. I traveled with this one every time. Like, it is definitely a like go-to, I'm not thinking about it type, I'm reaching for this palette and traveling with it type of palette. Whew, that was a lot to say. Okay, another palette that I honestly should have never bought. I bought this one because I am committed. And also I loved the previous year's edition of it so much. It was in my like favorites of the year, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be another one. But the Pat McGrath Celestial Nirvana larger eyeshadow palette, it just didn't do it for me. And I really was like excited about this one, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is, you know, different for Pat. It has so much color for it, because I think with Pat, she tends to lean more towards like a neutral based palette with pops of color. But this really is like more of like a colorful based palette. And I was like, oh my gosh, like the Celestial Odyssey, I think that's the one that came out. No, not Odyssey. Not Odyssey. Oh, the one that came out in 2021. I could not get enough of that one. Like, could not get enough. But this one, it didn't hit for me. The matte shades are definitely more dry. They're extremely pigmented, but like still not, I'll say it like this. They definitely feel like dry pigment. So just not the most comfortable on the eye. Shimmers are beautiful, but just not, you know, just not anything that like really speaks to me. doesn't speak to me at all. So this one, I could have easily left this one. Like, if, you know, I would have known about it. If I had known what I know now about it, I would have definitely been like, I'm not buying that, because I already know I'm not going to use it. But, you know, you live and you learn. And here we are. Okay, another one that I love. This is not a necessarily new palette. It's like a spinoff of another one. Danessa Myricks. The Experience palette. So this is the smaller version of her Lightworks 3 palette, because we know that the Lightworks 3 palette is discontinued. And I love this palette for travel reasons, because when I want to bring these types of shades with me, I still have the original Lightworks palette, and I never want to travel with it, because even though the packaging is sturdy, I'm like, if anything breaks, this was before this palette came out, I was like, I can't get another one, and I'm gonna be so upset because I love this palette. But when she came out with this one, I was like, perfect. It's small, very compact. I can travel with this. God forbid something happens and one of the shadows breaks. Still got the original one at home. And all of my favorite shades in the larger one are in this one. So absolutely love this one. I think this is still available. Highly suggest that you get it. I've already reached out to her. I sent her either it was a text DM or a voice note DM, and I was like, Danessa, so I'm out of town and I have the Experience palette with me, and I would really like a travel version of Lightworks 4. Don't know if you're even thinking about that. You probably already are. I just want you to know somebody would like it. And she was like, thank you so much for letting me know. We're always, you know, here to listen to you all. I was like, just wanted to put it out there, just to let you know. I need Lightworks 4 in travel edition, because that's another one I would love to travel with, but I'm too scared to travel with it right now. Here's one, I'm not gonna say I dislike it, because I actually did enjoy it. But I cannot believe I'm about to say this. I don't even know if I wanna say this, y'all, because I don't wanna eat my words. So I'm gonna formulate this sentence very carefully. Hear what I'm saying. I don't know if I will continue buying these palettes if they're going to continue to be made similar to this. And I'll explain. Okay, McGrath Mothership 10 Moonlit Seduction. Okay, so when I reviewed this palette, I really did enjoy this newer formulation of her special shades. Like, it's not the astral shades that we're used to. And I can appreciate her trying something different. But for me, when I think Mothership, I think astral shades. So if this is the formulation that she's gonna be moving forward with, I'm not gonna feel the need to grab the Motherships like I've been grabbing them over the past few years. I have been collecting them. I have all of them. And so the only thing that would make me want to keep buying it is the completionist in me. Like, you got all 10, like you keep getting them. But I am learning, and I need somebody to help me figure this out. I am learning that I do not reach for my Motherships. And I cannot tell you why. And that's why this palette is on the side of this, I was about to say this show, this video of like, I really shouldn't have bought it, because I can't tell you if I reached for this 5 times. And that's a shame, because these shades are really pretty, and these shades are really pretty. Like, there was nothing wrong with this palette. I think it's beautiful. I would definitely still recommend it if somebody was like, do you think it's a good palette? Yes. Now, you're not getting Mothership Experience, because I think Mothership Astral shades, but it's still a beautiful palette. But in my opinion, it's not worth $125. I think it's now $128. And, you know, it's just, it doesn't give me Mothership feels. But even the Mothership palettes with the astral shades, y'all, I can't tell you. I don't know why I don't reach for them. I think the reason why I don't is because I hyped the Mothership palettes up in my head so much as like pure luxury. I can only use these palettes when I have like 5 hours to do my makeup. I don't think I've ever taken that stigma off of them. So I don't reach for them for like, everyday quick type looks, because I'm like, we got to reserve this palette when we could spend like 5 hours on the eye. And I need to break out of that, because they are eyeshadow palettes that need to be used. So there we go. Now, if Pat does come out with another Mothership with the same formulation as in Moonlit seduction. I can't promise you I won't buy it, but I will tell you I will think about it. It won't just be the immediate add to cart, because I'm like, give me my astral shades. Give them to me. Give them to me. Okay, a palette that I really enjoyed. Oh, I love this little thing here. Okay, so Chanel, remember they came out with their Tweed palettes? So I picked up a couple, and the one that I really love is 04 Tweed Brune et Rose. Okay, here we go. I was like, can't open it. I used this one for my birthday. It's such a little simple thing, nothing complex, but I love the way that my eyes look with this palette. So neutral, but effective, like slightly sultry, depending on the look that I create with it. So beautiful. And the formulation is actually really good in this palette. If you're around my complexion, a little deeper than me, I think you could enjoy this palette. It's definitely not gonna be a palette for everyone, but like for those quick, simple eye looks that you just wanna have an effective eye look, but nothing crazy over the top, I really enjoyed this one. It was so beautiful. Okay, so here's one that I really was excited about, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love the first version of this. I'm gonna love this one even more because the color story is more up my speed. And I did enjoy it, but my excitement for it quickly waned. And it is the Patrick Ta Major Dimensions 2 eyeshadow palette. So I raved and raved and raved about Major Dimensions 1, okay? It was the more neutral looking one. So this one has more of those like rosy pinky tones, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the palette for me. Like, once again, love these types of tones. And formulation in this palette, I honestly think is better than the formulation in the original one, because for all of the shimmer shades, I really do enjoy them. For either of the two eyeshadow palettes, I don't use these like cream shades. So that's, you know, I could have honestly done without them. And then I really enjoyed the matte shades. But like I said, my excitement quickly waned for it, and I can't really tell you why. I don't think it has anything to do with like error in the palette, or, you know, formula is not good, or I don't know. I just didn't really like reach for it as much as I thought I would. So this is one that didn't get a lot of love and attention like it probably should have gotten based on how excited I was about it. It just didn't. And I've had it sitting in my drawer that I reach for, you know, for eyeshadow palettes that I really do want to reach for more, and it just sat and sat and that was pretty much it. So I hate that it didn't get loved on as much as I wanted it to get loved on, because it is a really beautiful palette, but you know, it is what it is. Ooh, another Chanel palette. This one I was so afraid I was gonna miss out on, and I got it. This was the Chanel Mediterraneen palette. Another one, so I waited to get this one because I saw it and I was like, ain't nothing special about this, Chelsea. Don't do it. Don't feed into the hype, because you know it's gonna sell out and then you're not gonna be able to get it. Like, don't waste your money. And then I kept seeing it, and every time I saw someone do a look with this palette, I was like, but see, I need that. And I finally got my hands on it and I was like, yep, this one's pretty. Simple, like I said, very simple, kind of effortless looks, but so pretty. And I love this color story with like army green khaki color. These shimmers are so beautiful and effective, and I just love that like they really allow the eye to pop so subtly but so beautifully. So I was really happy with this one. Okay, here's an eyeshadow palette that I actually did use a good amount. So like this palette kind of falls in the middle, because it's not one that I would say I love or loved in 2022, but I definitely got my money's worth from it. And it's the Natasha Denona, what is this, mini bronze palette. So I used this palette a nice little bit around the time that it came out, and formulation is great. The shimmer is really beautiful and impactful, but it's like why I don't put it in like the actual loved category is because you can't really get too many different types of looks out of this palette if you're like around my complexion. But the reason why I don't hate it is because these are perfect like one and done shades for me. Like if I just want to do like something really quick in the transition, or like all over the eyelid, and then throw like the deeper shade along the bottom, and then pop this in the inner corner. Like, beautiful, stunning. And I can do that with pretty much any of these eyeshadows, but it's, you know, definitely not one of those palettes where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, let me reach for it, because like I really enjoy using it. This is like one of those, like, I got 15 minutes to do my makeup and I'm trying to do a full face, but I need like really quick, easy to go and use types of products. That's where this one falls. So this one like falls in the middle, but I'm gonna put it over here on the like, I could have done without it palette. Okay, we've only got a couple left. Yep, a couple left. So we've got Natasha Denona Pastel palette. I enjoyed this one way more than I thought I would. So I was really excited about this one because of the color story. And I was like, whoa, this is bright, perfect for spring. Like, give me all the Easter eggs. Like, this just makes me think about springtime. But I was concerned about these pastel shades, because pastel shades on deeper complexions, it can go ashy real quick if there's not enough pigment to it, and if the intensity of the pastel shades is not done right. And it was done right in this palette. So beautiful, very much pigmented. The shades that you see in the palette are the shades and the intensity of shades that do transfer on the eyes. And I really enjoyed this one. Like, this one sat on my vanity where like I commonly reach for products that I want to use often for a hot minute. And so I was pleasantly surprised with this one, that I thought I was gonna review it to be a reference, but I didn't think I was gonna enjoy it. And I was like, oh, but I really do. This is really great. And then the last one that I have actually is also one that I really enjoyed. So it's not one that I don't like at all, but the Lisa Eldridge Sorcery palette. Look at her. This one I really enjoyed because I was like, I don't have a color story like this, but the formula, y'all, is so different and unique. So this, I think she calls these velvet mattes. Forgive me if I'm wrong, because I can't remember now what she called this matte shade here, but I think it's a velvet matte, but it feels, if whatever the description of it is, like if it's a velvet matte, it felt like velvet on the eyes. The intensity, the richness of the shades, like out of this world. And I love the color combination that she put in this particular palette. I have another one. What is this one called? Myth. I enjoy Myth, but Myth was just okay to me. Like, it wasn't anything that I liked or disliked. It wasn't anything wrong with it, nothing that I would dislike about it at all. I really enjoy it, but it just doesn't, like, it didn't like get me as excited as Sorcery did. And a lot of people apparently liked it because it was the first palette to sell out from this launch. But this one is really, really beautiful. And I'm really happy that her first launch of eyeshadow palettes, she came out with formulas that not everybody is seeing in your traditional palettes, and it's a winner. So guys, that is my 2022 eyeshadow palette showdown, I guess we'll call it that. Let me know your thoughts down below if you saw some of your favorites in this video. Let me know down below what some of your favorite eyeshadow palettes were from 2022. And if you've made it to this point in the video and you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I would love for you to consider subscribing, joining the Glam Girl Squad. And guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in my very next video. Bye guys.